Can you believe that this stitched piece was created from using scraps for making a quilt? Join me today and follow step by step as I create this cute little bear using simple stitches and a few scraps of fabric. Sit back and relax and stitch along and make your own. Let's get started. Starting with a piece that is already stitched. This is truly made from scraps. Even the batting on the back was created from small strips of batting that I had stitched together. Here's another example of taking strips of batting and stitching them together. These scraps are all left over from a quilt that I had made from double gauze. And I can link to that project so you can have a look at the quilt that I made. So I used these scraps and I slow stitched them using mostly pearl cotton, and I didn't have any plan about what I wanted it to be. So I've turned to my templates and I've pulled out today this baby bear. This is from my set of baby animals where there's 2 baby bears, a duckling, and a deer fawn. So I'm placing the template on my stitched piece, and I think it's a nice size. And you can even see from the white of the template, it would be really nice to make this a polar bear. I think that would look really cute on this background. I'm thinking more of a brown bear or a grizzly bear cub. And I have 2 pieces of fabric that might work well for this. One is a dyed piece in beautiful shades of golden brown, and that makes me think of a bear. And I also have this piece of batik. It's got some of the same colors and also some brown in it, and I think both of these would work really well. And this is a place where I want to say that there's always more than one possibility about what you can do with a stitched piece. So I'm going to test out both of these pieces and see which one I like better. I'm going to use an erasable pen. I'm using a friction pen here, and I'm going to trace the template onto the fabric, and then I'm going to cut it out. I'm going to do that with both pieces. I'm going to start with this piece of batik. Because it's batik, both sides have the pattern, so I could put this bear in either orientation, and I could stitch it on, and with very minimal stitching, I could create a beautiful silhouette and a beautiful stitched piece. So I'm liking this a lot. I'm going to do the same thing with this dyed piece of fabric, tracing it and cutting it out. Here's my dyed piece of fabric on top of my stitched piece. Also really, really cute. So really there's no wrong choice here. I think that they both look really, really good. I'm going to choose to use the dyed piece today. And that's because I want an opportunity to do a lot of stitching myself and create the colors and the texture with the stitching. But don't discount a nice pattern fabric for a silhouette like this. So I've chosen some floss colors that match my bear, and I'm starting with the lightest color I can find that matches, and I'm moving towards a darker color that goes. So these first 3 colors are very close matches, and the darkest color, which is a golden brown color, will be a really nice accent. It will show up more in the stitching. So now I've got some nice options. I'm going to stitch the bear on with the color that is the closest match to the bear, and that's this one here. It's one of the mid-tones, not the lightest or the darkest. And I'm bringing out applique pins. They're small pins that are really nice for stitching smaller pieces. I've put a pin at the top, and I really think that that's enough to hold it in place. Put another one in towards the legs. And when I try a third one, what it's really starting to do is add some lumps. And it's because I've put the pin right on a seam there, and it's not really needed. This is enough to secure this piece. So I'm going to come in with 2 strands of floss in that color that closely matches. I'm just going to go all the way around the edges. I'm going to go far away enough from the edges so that I don't start fraying the fabric. And my goal here is to attach. I'm not ready to start adding any kind of decorative stitch, any kind of fur markings, or anything like that. This is just attaching. I'm using a straight stitch, and I'm doing both the stab style stitch where I go from the front to the back, and also I'm doing the running stitch style where I'm staying on the top with the needle and I'm coming out one stitch over. I'm doing that wherever I can, and where it's awkward or bulky, I'm going to use the stab stitch. I've worked my way around back to where I've started, and now my bear is attached, and I'm ready to outline the bear with a color that is slightly darker than the one I just used. This is my golden brown color. I'm going to go around the piece again, and this time I'm going to use the back stitch so that I make a solid line. So you can see here on the bottom where I've begun this outline stitching, and it's creating a nice silhouette. It's making that golden brown color of the bear really glow. When I get to the part where I stitch the ears, instead of using a back stitch, I'm going to stitch straight stitches. I'm going to go off the edge and come back into my silhouette. The reason I'm doing this is I think it's going to make the ears a little bit bigger, and it's going to give a nice furry look to those ears. So you can see here I've stitched the ears. I'm liking the effect that I've got there. I went over the top of the head with that same stitch. Now I've switched back to the back stitch to outline the rest of this bear. Now I'm turning my attention to the background, and right at the top of the bear, it's on the seam that's in between the blue and the gray. And I want to blend those two colors together. That's going to create a transition between the two colors. And there's some spots where the gray fabric is curling up and fraying. This double gauze is very thick and doesn't want to lie flat on the edges. So adding this extra stitching is going to push down those edges, as well as blending the blue with the gray, so that it's all pushed into the background and so that my silhouette of the bear can stand out more. So I can see, even with the small amount of stitching that I've done here, the stitching has pushed the background further back and allowed the ears and head of the bear to come forward. It's a much cleaner look. So I'm going to continue with this gray. I'm going to add stitching lines all the way down through this mid-tone blue. And that's going to unite the two colors, and it's going to create a unified background for this bear. So now I'm turning back to the bear, and I'm going to stitch on the bear's body. So I'm bringing out my friction erasable marking pen, and I'm going to mark some lines as a guide for when I'm stitching. And what I'm doing here is making sort of a rounded shape, thinking about where the bear's back leg and back hip would be. And then I'm coming in and drawing some small lines where I think the edges of the head would be, down sort of underneath the chin and the cheek area. And that's going to give me a rough guide as to where to stitch. And I'm going to use not the darkest brown color, but a mid-tone color. So I'm going to follow the lines that I had marked with the pen. I can erase them anytime with heat. And then those initial lines that I've stitched are going to be a guide for the rest of my stitching. You can see here that I've begun following that sort of oval shaped line that I've made for the hip. And then the other lines I've begun going straight up and down for the front legs of the bear. So here I've filled in quite a bit of stitching, and I've left a little bit right on the chest. And I've decided to use a lighter color to fill in that area. So here's that area on the chest that I've filled in with lighter stitches, just for a bit of fun contrast. And now I'm going to fill in the head and the face of the bear. So I've stitched the face of the bear, and now I want to add some eyes, and I'm going to start by making French knots for the eyes in black. And I'm using one strand of floss here. Now it's not necessary to try and stitch the face of this bear. This silhouette is very recognizable as a bear already, so it's perfectly acceptable to just leave it as a silhouette and leave the details to the imagination of the viewer. I've done that with silhouettes countless times, and it's really nice to leave it that way. If you're up for a little more of a challenge, then feel free to stitch the face of the bear. But it's also really easy to get frustrated when trying to do this. So just know that leaving it blank is really beautiful and a really nice choice. So in stitching this face, I sort of made a guess about where I want the eyes to be. and I've made my small marks, and I've hopped down to where I think his nose is going to be, and I've started making some marks, and it's already looking cute. And this might be a good time to pull up a picture of a bear to try and help inform what to do to enhance it even further. So what I've decided to do here is make the snout of the bear a lighter color and the cheeks of the bear a darker color. And what I'm hoping that will do is push the snout out towards the viewer to give it a dimensional effect. So here I've started stitching in sort of a V shape under the nose and towards the eyes. So I'm attempting to add some depth here to make his snout stick out. So I'm going to continue using this darker shade to enhance the cheek area. I'm going to bring those darker stitches all the way out to the edges to make him look really furry. I'm using 2 strands of floss, and if I think I need to, I'll switch to 1 to get the effect I want. So you can see here I've moved that dark brown color all the way out to the edges. It's looking really cute. The snout is lighter already because it doesn't have those dark stitches, but I think it can also benefit from having a few stitches in one of the lighter colors. So I'm stitching on the snout and moving up and over the eye to give him some little eyebrows, and that's going to highlight his eyes even more as well. So here's the face starting to come together. Just have some final touches. I want to add a little mouth. You can see here with a stitch on just one side, kind of lopsided, is one kind of expression, and adding a second stitch on the other side will give another type of expression. So there's lots of flexibility in here. And then after stitching that mouth, I want to add a few more stitches in the lighter color to complete his snout. And then I want to leave it at that because my goal is to have more of a folk art look and certainly nothing photorealistic. So I'm happy with his face and the way it's looking. And I also like that there's heavier stitching in his head and face and lighter stitching on his body. But of course, an option here is to add more stitching on the body, more details as well. All I want to do at this point is take the darker brown color that I've stitched on the bear's face and add it to the feet. And I'm going to do the same type of stitching that I did around the ears, where I'm doing straight stitching, perpendicular, going off of the edge of the silhouette and coming back in. I think this is going to ground the bear. It's going to make his feet even chunkier, and it's going to hint at claws. So I'm thinking at this point that this completes the bear, and I'm turning my attention to the background again. And I'm grabbing the gray floss that I had stitched in the top 2/3, and I'm adding some of that gray in this dark blue area. And this is to unify the overall effect of the background as one piece with a ground and a horizon and a sky. I'm glad I did that. That really has pushed the background back and brought the bear forward. So I'm very happy with the way it's looking now, and I'm feeling like it's almost complete. This is a good time to step away and come back to your piece so that you know when it's finished. So now that I've come back, I've decided that I want to add some of the colors that exist in the bear to the background. So I've chosen one of the mid-tones, and I'm going to the top, and I'm stitching some French knots. I don't have a plan in terms of where to put them. I'm just going to move around and let my eye guide where the next French knot is going to go. So I've decided to add more French knots, and I'm going to switch up the color. I'm bringing out these colors to show that these two mid shades are very, very close. One is slightly darker than the other. So I'm switching to the darker color for my next round of French knots, and I'm placing them right beside where I had put the first ones. I'm going to make little clusters of 2 or 3 French knots right beside my first round in that lightest mid-tone color. This is going to add some dimension and some interest. The clusters are going to show up more because there's more knots packed together, and the color differences are really going to add something. I'm finishing up my last French knot, and I'm going to zoom in so you can see the interesting effects that are happening. I'm using that same color. I'm going underneath the bear, doing a bit of mark making there too, to add a bit of dimension to the ground that the bear's standing on. So here are those marks. It's very subtle, but I'm happy to bring that color into other parts of this stitched piece. The last thing that I want to do is bring in some black. You can see that I've stitched black in the background when I had initially made this piece with no plan, and I've got some sort of diagonal lines, uneven lines in a couple of spots. And I want to bring that into the rest of the background. So I'm starting at the edge, and I'm going to do the running stitch up and down. I'm going to start in this top area where it's just the gray and go all the way across and see what I think of the effect. These are straight lines in the same direction as the black lines that already exist. I'm hoping by adding straight lines row on row, it's going to integrate these diagonal stitches. So here it is stitched in the top, and I'm liking the effect here. I like what that does for the French knots. And I'm hoping by continuing the stitching down in that middle blue area that it's going to unite the piece even more. So I'm connecting those stitching lines to the ones I'd made above, just continuing them all the way down. I'm almost finished here. You can see what a nice effect this is giving. So here's what it looks like with all of the lines stitched. If you didn't know that there was already these existing slanting stitches before, you may not notice. I'm really happy with the way that this has turned out. And I think that I'm going to call this done. So what to do with this piece? Well, one idea is to place it on a canvas. This is a 5x5 canvas. And it fits perfectly on here, just with some of the black that I've painted on sticking out. That's a really nice idea. So I could glue this on like I've done with other pieces, and that would be really nice to hang on the wall. This piece would also be really nice on my jean jacket as another patch, and I may do that as well. I haven't decided yet what I'm going to do with this piece. I'm so happy with it. It really is a recycled piece from start to finish. I loved working with double gauze to make the large quilt, and it was just as fun working with scraps of double gauze to make this little bear piece come to life. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have some inspiration to use scraps that you have and make your own piece. Until next time, happy stitching.